Biggest study ever done on this was done in 1994. And what they found is that the average was 54% were able to determine truth and fiction. People say to me, oh, it's really easy to detect deception. Well, then you would be a billionaire. Some of the people that have made disclosures to me when it comes to the horrific acts that they've done, murder, rape, robbery, child molestation, it was not in their best interest to talk to me.
It's quite a harsh professional life.
Yeah, it is hard to turn off. Your friends and your family are probably the biggest consumers of lies when it comes to lying to you. Everybody wants somebody to listen to them, especially people, a lot of the people that I talk to, because they're maladjusted.
Have you found there's like maybe not a universal tell sign, but there's a more common tell sign for when someone might not be telling the whole truth?
Yeah, context is very important. That's a good question. And I get that a lot, is that it is a very, very difficult skill. The biggest study ever done on this was done in 1994, in which 10,000 people were a part of the study. And law enforcement, college students ran the gamut. And what they found is that the average was 54% were able to determine truth and fiction. And the one thing that did stand out in Paul Ekman's study was that Secret Service agents were around the 70th percentile, and nobody could understand why was that the case. And I think it truly is observation, is that for a career, we look at people, we watch people, especially in our protective, mode. And that is so helpful, because then you truly understand what is normal behavior and what is abnormal behavior. So for me, when we look at counterfeit money, you don't want to try to understand counterfeit by understanding every which way money could be counterfeited. You try to understand what is genuine money. And that's the way we did it in the Secret Service, because we tried to stop counterfeit, is we would learn, how is it engraved? How is the paper made? All those little intricacies of genuine, because if it's not genuine, it has to be counterfeit. So I take the kind of same role when I look at human behavior. If it's not genuine behavior, chances are it's manipulated behavior. And as a result, why is that a manipulation? Are they trying to make me feel good? Is it a white lie, or is it something more nefarious? So when I'm trying to set up, hey, obviously context is everything. In a polygraph or in an interrogation, I'm really laser focused. But in your day to day, it's very difficult, because as a tribal society, we were brought up to lie, because if you were 100% honest in your tribe, that was not necessarily a benefit. You might get kicked out of your tribe. And you see that still today, is that your friends and your family are probably the biggest consumers of lies when it comes to lying to you. It's just, a lot of times it's not a big lie. It's just, it's a social lubricant, lying. So when does it become problematic? I think it just determines what you're lying about. So if we wanted to kind of break this down, the most common lie is omission. And it is very, very hard to detect, because, let me ask you this question. Do you have a dog?
No.
Okay. If you did have a dog, you'd have to take it out on a walk. And if you had it off the leash, it could go wherever it wanted to go. And that's kind of like somebody telling you a story. They can go wherever they want. It's easy to omit things. Whereas if I ask you a yes or no question, that's kind of like having the dog on the leash, harnessed. If I can ask you a yes or no question, I should see a yes or no answer, and I should see it in a timely fashion. Anytime that doesn't happen, it's a huge red flag. All right. So if I hear delay, meaning if I ask you a bunch of questions and I'm used to, X, Y, and Z, yes, no question one, yes, no question two, and I get no, no, and then I get no. Very subtle, right? But why was there that delay? And that's the first thing. And the second thing is, if I had my eyes closed, would I put a question mark or an exclamation point behind what they just said? Meaning, there's a difference between no and no. Okay, very subtle, but no is almost like me putting my hands up over my face, looking at you, saying, did you believe that? All right. So those are two of the most common. And once you start looking for them, I do this a lot with my kids. I probably shouldn't, but you hear that. Did you clean your room? Yes. Okay. Or they lie very specifically. Like, did you get all your homework done? Yeah, I got all my English homework done. And that wasn't the question. Did you get all your homework done? They lied very specifically. So the follow-up there is, well, did you get all your homework done? Just ask it again. Oh, I still got to do my biology. Damn it. Right. So little things like that. Liars lie specifically. They many times delay, and vocal inflection are very, very common things to pick up. And then it just kind of depends on how far you want to go down the rabbit hole as far as some other secondary features that I look for.
When, say, for example, you do catch someone out in a lie, first thing they go to is justifying the lie or the reason they lied to you, which say it's a bit of a gray area because they can sometimes be, right, I just didn't want to tell you the full truth, or I thought this might do something to you that I didn't want to happen. So, like, in
Mhm.
your time seeing these people that you've been interrogating, interviewing, watching day to day, and you see them lying and they justify their behavior, what have you learned about that human tendency we have to just justify the behavior that we do?
Yeah, a lot of it's a rationalization. Sometimes they did have nefarious intent and they're just putting a stamp on it as far as, oh, I just didn't really want to hurt your feelings. I didn't think you could handle it. I didn't think this was the right timing. No, you knew exactly what this was about. Okay. So a lot of times that's us putting our little watermark on it to say, no, 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 it was, I just didn't want to be that guy. Well, you're the one that made the lie. So let's be careful how we label that. When somebody goes into a confessional, what about that confessional is perfect for information exchange?
You can't see the other person.
Yeah, can't see the other person. So you have anonymity, you have privacy. Okay. What else do you have? You've got non judgment, in that the priest is not going to be very good if you're making a disclosure and he's like, what? Really? Okay. So a lot of times we're creating a bad environment or we're asking a question at the wrong time to get the truthful answer. Okay. We're catching them around other people. And when you're asking somebody a hot question and they're around other people, now they have to worry about saving face. Maybe it's a sensitive issue. Whereas if you kind of pulled them to the side, whether it be at work, whether it be in your home, and you asked them there and you maybe primed it by being, look, I'm not upset by this. Okay. Look, I understand this type of stuff happens. And so you're fronting what would be their fear of your reaction. You're kind of getting out in front of it, saying, "Hey, it's okay. I talked about this type of stuff all the time. Look, there's no perfect people. I just want perfectly honest people." And then you ask the question in a private environment where you have a frontally aligned posture, a non-judgment, not a scowl on your face like contempt. If a priest was doing that, you wouldn't want to talk to him. So we can share some lessons from the doctor's office, therapist's office, and Catholic confessional to say, let's approach people at the right time, not right after they got there for a commute, not when they're getting ready to run out the door, not when they just got back from, home from driving an hour in traffic, and getting them away from people that might other people that might judge them. So the right time, the right place with the right words on the front end may keep that lie from ever happening. And another little tip, if somebody's telling you a tall tale, do you have anybody in your life that ever tells you tall tales?
Yeah, many.
Okay, so many. So I want you to think about that person. It could be about how many goals they scored in a football match. It could be about their luck with the ladies, how many fish they caught. I don't care what it is, but they're telling you, they're spinning some yarn. They're telling a tale. It's difficult sometimes to ask them a direct question like, are you lying to me? Because now it's, you know, evil versus good and you're putting them on the spot. Whereas you can kind of give them a way out by saying, let's say this person said they scored 40 goals in a football season and you're just not buying it. Okay. You're not buying it. You don't think they're that athletic. So you just say, wow, you scored 40 goals that one season of high school football. And they're like, oh man, I don't know how many it was, but it was a lot. That's usually what you get is you went from letting the dog walk itself to now you put the dog on the leash, but you primed it on the front end and gave them an out to kind of save face a little bit. When you scowl and you look at somebody and you say, "Did you do this?" It makes it much more likely that that person's going to lie to you.
Yeah, it's funny how you mentioned the kind of creating the perfect environment because I read not so long ago about the rapport effect, which is interviewers that murdered their the person on the other side of the table's body language and facial expressions, or if they had like a little tick tick tap on their toes or something, the more they murdered it and the more accolade they did it, the easier information came out to them. So there was like a big journalist school somewhere in, I think it might have been in the UK, but there was one guy in there that he's like insanely introverted, so shy, doesn't like to push on people, thinks it's wrong. Like he's about huge faith as well, so he doesn't feel like he wants to sin. But he got the most information out of people, out of anybody, because he was so paranoid that he shouldn't have been in the room. he copied everything they done, and there were people
Yes.
there that
Yes.
they'd wanted information from years, and they would just almost tell him it out of just purely because he would make him feel like a best
Yeah.
friend or something. I thought
Yeah.
that was so insane.
Yeah. You look at some of the best podcasters out there, and one of the ones I look at is Lewis Howes. Uh, Great podcast, but when they do the split screen and you watch his body language, he's completely attuned. And good podcasting is like good communication, right? Like if right now I have a center cam, so I'm looking directly in the center of the screen because I want you to see eye contact, which is so important in communication. We don't do it now because we look at our phones, but I want to be at that 75% mark. I don't want to be creepy. I want to look from the top of your eyes down to your nose in that general vicinity. I don't want to stare, but I want soft eyes. And in that podcast, what that podcaster does is he is so good with his active listening skills, his mimicry. And what it does is it really makes somebody that's nervous, because if you go on a podcast where there's 300,000 listeners, I mean, that's nerves, right? You're going to have a little bit of anxiety. So what that person is doing is they're advocating for you. They want you to succeed with their body language. They're making you feel comfortable. The other thing great podcasters do is prep work on the front end, right? They're going to watch other podcasts. They're going to read the people's book. They're going to come up with little touch points that they either want to accentuate or avoid. Well, that's the same thing I do in good communication. When you want information, what are you going to do? You're going to let them talk 80% of the time. You're going to talk 20% of the time. What are some of the worst podcasts that you see? It's 50-50, right? The guest is talking and then the host interrupts them, and the host should be guiding and shepherding. They shouldn't be controlling. And that's what good communication is. So I think if you really look at the body language, word choice, and the soundtrack that really good podcast hosts do, is that's good communication. And I've seen it in your podcast. You let people talk, and then you refine the message based upon what you heard. And then look, if the conversation is going this way and it needs to come back, you'll steer it back. If it's great right here, you'll keep it within the lanes. And so I think you're definitely on the right track with how you do your podcast, as far as if you use that as a metaphor for communication.
Fun enough, I'm going to just flex that muscle now and stay where we are, because
There
do
you
you
go.
think that people are underestimating how much making the other person feel comfortable is in communication?
It's everything, right? Is that it goes from somebody just getting up there and orating and just speaking to you versus communicating. Is that some of the people that have made disclosures to me when it comes to the horrific acts that they've done, murder, rape, robbery, child molestation, it was not in their best interest to talk to me. But I tried to be the right person in the right place at the right time to make them feel comfortable. And it's amazing how many times, and one of my mentors taught me this, is he viewed every communication with bad people as, one, I'm never going to judge them. And two, I'm going to treat this as, at the end of the day, I want them to give me a Christmas card next year. And it's amazing. He was an FBI agent. And it's amazing how many times he'd get Christmas cards from prison from people he talked to, horrible people, serial killers. But he listened to them. And everybody wants somebody to listen to them, especially a lot of the people that I talk to, because they're maladjusted. They're not talking to a lot of people, or they can't talk to people about what they've done because they'd be arrested. So when you listen and you let them teach you, okay, one of the greatest lessons I ever had was in grad school, where I worked at a jail as a research project. And I would talk to individuals arrested for all types of offenses in a major US city. And I would give them a Snickers bar and a Sundrop, like a fruit cola. And they loved life. And I let them have the stage. And I would basically do a podcast on them about their life. And this was 30 years ago, about how do you make crack? How do you make methamphetamines? How do you get the biggest return on investment as a pimp? Like stuff I probably shouldn't be asking, but they're teaching me. And when you teach someone, okay, then what happens is their cortisol levels go down, their heart rate goes down, they sync with you, they associate you with the dopamine and serotonin rush that they're getting. So you become friendly with them, and all you're doing is just letting them have the stage. Is too many times people want to tell their story, and then you think by getting rapport, you're like, oh, me too.
I had Dominic Colenso on a few weeks ago, who is a communication coach. And we didn't really speak about it too much because he's obviously in a different area of communication. But what how can we become better listeners? Because you mentioned the podcasters that are active listeners, and then you mentioned the ones that we probably don't gravitate towards that want to still the show. How do you maybe fall in between the two of them? Because there is times where you do want to tell your side of the story too.
I do this with my students. I would have them listen to their communication. So that would be like in the form of an interrogation or a polygraph without the video. And then I would have them watch without the sound, watching just the video. And by doing that, they learned, man, I'm not congruent here. I'm speaking too much. I'm uh, monopolizing the conversation. My hand movements are exaggerated. My speed of my voice is not at 150 words per minute. It's at 200 words per minute. So really going back, it's the same thing, whether football, soccer, any sports, what do you do? A military operation, what do you do afterwards? You do an after action review. And it's a place to kind of dive in and see, where am I getting it right? Where am I getting it wrong? And you do that self-assessment. And it wasn't till I did that till I realized, I was getting cocky in the room. I was speaking too fast. I was manipulating the conversation. And when you start to do that, you're losing that connection with people. So for me, you mentioned flexing your muscles earlier, that term. It's about using all five of your senses. Like it's a sport. You have to train like that. Is you have to prep, you have to obviously perform, and then afterwards you have to sit there and look at the X's and O's and see, like, how did I do that well or not? And I think I was very critical of myself, and I think that was extremely helpful for me. And having a good kind of wolf pack of people around you that you empower to say, hey, can you listen to this and see what you think? And not, you don't want them to be acolytes. You want them to be truly brutally honest with you and say, wow, man, you talked a lot. You didn't ask a lot of good follow-up questions. Because to me, when I do a big presentation, I always want the reviews from the audience. And I tell them, don't just give me, hey, great job. I want negative reviews, because that's how you make yourself better. So reviewing and then asking for brutal honesty from people is how you get better.
When you're meeting someone from the first time, are you analyzing them deeply, or have you left that in the Secret Service?
I think I still do it to a point. But if you're meeting, obviously if I'm meeting my daughter's boyfriend, yeah, it's going to be on high alert, right? For the first time. When it comes to first impressions, okay, we have to be very, very careful how we put horns and halos on people, because we are very often wrong. And criminals, people that scam you, people that take advantage of you, often are the ones that make the best first impressions. How many times have you met somebody and you thought, that guy's a jerk. I don't really like that guy. You meet him a couple more times, you're like, yeah, he's pretty cool. And the next thing you know, he's your best friend, right? That happens over and over because we have that evolutionary, built into us of, is this person here to hurt me? And that's fine if you're on the streets of Belfast at 2 a.m. and you hear a bottle break or you hear somebody walking up behind you. Yes, make that first impression, err on the side of caution. But in personal and professional relationships, be very wary about handing out those horns and handing out those halos too quickly, because many, many times we're wrong with that. Okay. The way it was intended to be was my eyes and my ears scan the horizon to see what's coming to eat me. And if it's happening, let's summon the tribe to defend ourselves or climb up a tree. But if you and me just meet at a pub over a Guinness, over a pint, I could make a horrific assessment. So I want multiple times of meeting you before I'm like, all right, we're good. All right. Or, if you make a bad first impression, it happens. I'm going to give you a second chance. So I would say it's not so much as far as what did I read or what did I not read as far as manipulation. It's be very careful about making that assessment too quickly. And also understand that we used to put our diaries under our bed. Now we put them online. So it would be very easy for you or for anybody to, just like you do with a podcast guest, if you were on an online dating forum and you knew the person's name or you knew their Twitter handle or you knew their Instagram, TikTok, whatever, you could consume that information and you could create the perfect Prince Charming that could connect with that person. And that's what's scary. And that's where, sadly, with Secret Service, I'd see so many dating scams, online scams, Bitcoin scams, because these scammers would consume all the information that was out there about you, and they would know what your pain points are. They would know what things to stay away from, how to establish that initial rapport. they would leverage that and take advantage of you. So we got to be very careful about making those first impressions, because is your first impression built upon my social media stuff that's out there, or is this a true meeting? If it's a true meeting, then it's clean. Then yeah, there's going to be some certain things that I'm going to look at. I'm going to look at how quickly you're trying to move this conversation forward, because time is what usually gets us in trouble.
Something I talked about with Dr. Rod Berger on the show about the silence test that someone taught me a long time ago, which is I was trying to figure out ways that I could get better at communicating or telling when someone's telling bullshit in the show. Because in the early times, I had people on that never been on podcasts and they just make up shit to try and get clicks on TikTok and stuff. And there was a guy that told me about this test called the silent test, which is after you ask someone a question and they answer, see how long you can stay quiet before they start speaking again. Because if they start speaking again, that means they've lied and they're trying to recover their steps. Because someone who told the truth is going to look you right in the eye until you have something else to say. Because they're like, I said my part. I don't need to back this up with any information.
The science on it's a little back and forth, but I do see a time and a place where I ask a question, and it's usually not a yes, no answered question. It's usually like, hey, tell me what you did last night. And it's one of those things where, like you said, they provide they're hitting the play button and they're assessing you. They're throwing out their information. And when your assessment is you're just sitting there not responding, they need to feel like they need to put a little bit of spice on that, right? They need to put a little salt and pepper on what they just said, because you're not buying it. Whereas if it's the truth, it's the truth. It should just stand on its own. So I do agree with that assessment, in some respects. There's other little things that we can ask people, like, if somebody's telling you a tale or your kids are telling you a tale and they're like, I went here, I went here, I went here. Hey, is there any, did you go to the mall? And I know they went to the mall. Then you're going to see that reaction. You're going to see that delay. They're eyeing you up on, oh shoot, how do they know I went to the mall, right? So yeah, there's little ways that you can do that. We would ask. I would ask sometimes criminally. I'd say, hey, what do you think should happen to somebody that does X, Y, and Z? And it's kind of a little hack. It doesn't work great when it comes to minor offenses, but you'd be surprised. You ask your kids, hey, what do you think about somebody that lies about what should happen to somebody that lies about going somewhere and then telling their parents that they didn't do that? Oh, I don't know. Maybe if they just said they're sorry, it'll all be okay. So that's what they're wanting to have happen to themselves, right? Whereas if they say, I don't know, they should get in trouble and get grounded, I'm going to feel pretty good about that response, right? So there's little things that we can take from the criminal realm that we ask and kind of leverage it in our personal and professional relationships. But we got to be careful with that, because we hate to live in a society where people always feel like they're being interrogated.
So it's probably best now that we move into maybe some of the darker arts of communication, because you mentioned a few times about your experiences with criminals and stuff like that. And there's a huge thing at the minute where I don't know if you've seen this, but there's like a growing bubble of people that believe they're being manipulated by someone close to them. So in your time being around people that genuinely are born and bred manipulators, what have you learned about manipulation and how we can spot it?
It's very difficult. You're going to see all these TikToks, and I think you're probably referencing everywhere you see is a former expert or influencer that's like, these are the 5 telltale ways to determine if this person's a narcissist. This is 5 ways, or these are 5 ways to target harden yourself, right? It's very difficult, right? Especially if somebody is 30 years old, right? They've lived on this planet for 30 years. And if they're a narcissist and they've been that way, they've been able to navigate those waters and camouflage that. Sadly, a lot of the people that I talk to, pedophiles, hebophiles, so people that are engaging in relations with kids, they're some of the best manipulators on the planet. They are like CIA level, because they groom a situation, they groom the kid, they engage in the changing of secrets. They are experts at looking at reactions to see if they're in a safe place before they act. So they're doing a lot of the same things that we teach people at a very, very high level, for our overseas agents. So it is extremely difficult, and it bothers the hell out of me when I see people get online and say this is easy to do, or when people say to me, oh, it's really easy to detect deception. Well, then you would be a billionaire. You would be the richest person in the planet, If you can do what you say you're doing, meaning you're never manipulated, you're in all perfect relationships, you're never scammed, and you can tell when everybody's lying to you. Well, you wouldn't be on TikTok then, right? You'd be running a hedge company, or you would be we can work on some things around the margins, but it's very difficult, right? But the thing about manipulation, like I said, is it's all about access, right? If somebody's manipulating you repeatedly, what I find is people that continue to go back in that situation thinking that people are going to change. The best predictor of future behavior, bar none, is past behavior. So if somebody's done X, Y, and Z to you and manipulated you, don't let them back in the house. Kick them out of the house, metaphorically. Don't give them the keys to let them come back in. So it's too many times we're breaking this down, and these are the 10 signs. Hey, did they manipulate you? Get rid of them and don't let them do it again. There's 8 billion people on the planet. There are other people that will hang out with you that will not manipulate you, right? So find those people, and when they continue over time and over places to show you they are your running buddies, your friends, your ride or die people, like my kids will say, right? Once they're that wolf pack, that group, that's when you lock them down. And then you don't have to worry about people manipulating because you've kicked all those knuckleheads out, right? So if nothing else out of this interview, I want people just to do a self-assessment on their relationships, personal, professional, whatever the case may be. And if somebody has proven to you that they're a jerk, that they're a narcissist, that they're manipulating you, there is nothing you're going to say or do to them that's going to keep them from manipulating you in the future, especially if they're 35 years old. They're that way. That prefrontal cortex is cemented and it's not going to stop. So what needs to stop is the TikTok knuckleheads that are telling you that you can identify it and that you can change people, because you can't. If people could change, we wouldn't have millions of people in prison. I'm just saying.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I do know what the initial response is going to be, which is it's in the past, or they might change, or I have faith that they're going to be different this time. Do you think that is still a part of the deception cycle?
It can be. And it also depends on what was the manipulation, when was it, what was their end goal here, and is it a one-time thing? Have I talked to people, criminals that have turned their life around? Absolutely, because they had a good support group. But if you look in the mirror and you're like, how many times has this happened? Oh, it's happened about 9 times. Dude, come on. All right. Like, I am all about people being rehabilitated. I am all about, and I would see this. I was in juvenile justice before I got in the Secret Service. And I would see this where these kids at 14, 15, they'd make a mistake, and that maybe they didn't have a good family structure to go back to. But you know what? They could turn their life around. That prefrontal cortex wasn't cemented yet. It wasn't locked in until the age of 25. But when you see somebody that, once again, is 30, 35 years old, and we're talking, they've screwed me over left, right, here, and I think it's going to change, you have to focus on probabilities. The probability is it's not going to change. And if given those same set of circumstances, it's going to happen again. It's like when people talk to me about, well, my girlfriend or my boyfriend cheated on me. And I'm like, well, didn't you cheat with them to have them come into the relationship? It's like, what did you think was going to happen? They've done that the last 3 relationships. Did you think all of a sudden you were going to be the person that was going to be like, well, they'll never do it to me, right? So that's one of the things that, when you're trying, I mean, we look at this in threats, we look at this in the Secret Service, we'd look at hunters versus howlers, someone that just talked and they would maybe say something inappropriate, but we never thought they would act, versus a hunter that, if you looked at their past, they were a violent person who, whatever the case may be, where they had a history of doing violent things. That's somebody we really want to focus our resources on. So to me, once again, the best predictor of future behavior, past behavior. Look at someone's past. Chances are, and if we just focus on probabilities, if given the same set of circumstances, it's going to happen again. So it's not saying people can't change. It's saying if you don't have to put yourself in that situation, don't.
In working with the Secret Service, you've had kind of 2 sides of pressure. You have to deal with it in a way, and you have to also apply it. What have you learned about how people behave under pressure?
My first boss, Tim McCarthy, who took the bullet for Reagan, you saw stress, used gunshots. He made himself bigger and took a bullet for President Reagan. But then you also see people that freeze, and it's very hard in training to manufacture that level of stress, and you rep it and you rep it and you rep it and you hope you get it right. So when that happens, that you can act. I think the bigger thing we have in law enforcement is not in the moment strain. Okay. I think it's cumulative strain. And what I mean by that is, for me, it was talking to child molesters all the time. For me, it was shift work all the time. For me, it was, the schedule is constantly changing. That cumulative stress a lot of times and creates coping mechanisms that are negative for people in law enforcement, or the fire service or whatever, where they may turn to drinking to cope. They may have whatever. Okay, so to me, it is very, very hard to simulate. How am I going to handle that one-off individual wants to fight me, stab me, shoot me, do this bad thing? But too often we don't put enough uh, importance on how do individuals in law enforcement handle that cumulative strain. And like I said, I was blessed to have a great group of partners and supervisors, and jujitsu. Those were things that kept me healthy, happy, and kept my mental health. But sadly, and we see this in armed forces too, with 22 U.S. service members on average committing suicide a day, which is, exponentially more than died, seeing combat operations, is that cumulative stress, that PTSD that they dealt with, and not being able to identify it and create coping mechanisms for these people. And I say this here on Veterans Day here in America, that's something that we need to do better on how to deal with.
Have you ever heard of the Yerkes-Dodson law?
It's great. I'm glad you brought it up because I talk about it a lot as far as just a bell-shaped curve as far as level of arousal and performance, and that it's very important in communication where if I'm talking to somebody that has just been arrested, it is a significant life event for them, or they're coming in for a job to do a polygraph. On that bell curve of Yerkes-Dodson, their level of arousal is over here. So their ability to recall, do fine motor skills, whatever the case may be, is extremely inhibited. So I need to do things to kind of bring them back to the mean, so to speak, to where now their heart rate's not 170, it's 90, it's 80, to where it's a normal day for them. And that can be done by giving them food, water, a restroom break, by just talking in a nice, what Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator, would talk about as far as that FM DJ voice, where I do that to bring them back to the right headspace so that I can get the right information. And the reverse is true. We used to do a lot of search warrants on people here in the United States early in the morning. And the problem with talking to them right away is they're just woken up. So their level of arousal is over here. So I may need to get them a coffee. I may need to get them some food to get them once again back to the mean. So the goal is, and I think we're kind of circling back to maybe some things we started with as far as finding that right time, that right place to have that conversation. Because if your kid is very, very anxious when you're wanting to have that sensitive conversation, or they're very emotional, okay, is that I can't match that emotion. I need to deconflict and bring them down, because when we're both emotional, the other thing I like to learn is calm leads to calm. Distress leads to distress. And I can't feed into that. I can't add gasoline to that conversation. So I got to bring them back before, get them once again back to that mean of that Yerkes-Dodson before I can try to communicate with them. So when it comes to communication, yes, we got to be careful about our emotional contagion with my body language, if it's closed, if it's aggressive, and also with my vocal tone. If my volume's high, if it's high pitched, that goes back to evolution. A high pitched voice is making you think, oh man, I'm in distress. This is not good. So I'll deepen my tone a little bit. I'll soften my tone. I'll lower my volume, and I'll just calm them down from a body language standpoint so that we can effectively communicate.
We got a last question for you, which is it's kind of a generalized question, but it's a bit of a reflection too on, I mean, your entire career. But is there anything that you used to believe about people that since your career's now ended that you no longer do anymore?
Yeah, I would say a couple things. I would say that one, we're good at detecting deception because we're not. Okay. And I say that as somebody that's done that for my entire career. But I would say that that all people have a devil or a bad side or whatever the case may be. Is I used to think that when I first started that, man, there's so many evil people out there. Almost, I can think of 3 or 4 people that were truly evil. There's nothing I could have done to redeem those people. But the vast majority of the thousands of people I talked to that committed criminal offenses, there was situational factors. There was predispositions. There was things at the right time, at the right place, hit them that caused them to do that bad thing. Could have been emotional distress, financial stress, drug dependency, whatever the case may be. And that was a real eye opening for me, is that all people, in my view, have some redeemable good qualities that I really want to talk about and I really want to accentuate. The three in particular, I don't believe anything could be done with these people. They are committed the most heinous crimes I've ever seen. And when they described it to me, they had pleasure in describing what they did. Just truly evil people. Nothing could have done to save them. But that is something that I definitely learned, is everybody has some good in them. And many, many times it's just the situational factors or predispositions that cause them to do that bad thing.
Amazing. Brad, where can people find you? What have you got out and what's coming in the future?
I appreciate you asking. BradleyBeeler.com is the landing page for my new book called Tell Me Everything. It's a communication book where I started out writing a law enforcement communication book, and my editor and the book company said, no, this is a communication book in general that anybody can use. And so for the last 4 years, I put it together, and it's coming out this February. So would be honored if anybody wanted to check that out. Best social media where I try to put some material out is Brad Beeler 1865 at both Instagram and LinkedIn. So would love to have you join me. And I try to put some short reels on there as far as some of my thoughts. So thank you very much.